Hello, my name is Jonathan Forster, and welcome to the Multi-Story Thinking Podcast. I'm an interior designer and educator. My job is to improve quality of life and productivity by helping people to create beautiful and practical spaces to live and work in. The Multi-Story Thinking Podcast takes an educational slant to the interior design world. So sit back, relax, as we help unravel the mysteries of interior design. Ella Doran is a designer, textile mark maker and photographer who has created a wide range of highly acclaimed projects and objects across product and textile design, furniture and interiors. I interviewed her via Zoom at her London studio during the first few weeks of the COVID lockdown. In this episode, we discover how she set up her business after a chance meeting with a supplier, her philosophy on design and the importance of materials and processes, the challenges and opportunities of licensing, and how she got inspiration for a project by observing the landscape and sheep. Welcome to the Multi-Story Thinking Podcast, Ella. It's great to get you on and great to see you. The beauty of this remote world we're living in is that I've actually managed to interview you when previously I probably wouldn't have been able to get up to synchronize. So that's a real plus out of all of this. How are you coping?
I'm not embarrassed to admit, but I'm good.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about why is that? And part of it is, I think as being designers and artists, we're used to adapting quickly to things and taking things on in new ways. But also personally in my life and business, I'd stepped back to not just recalibrate, but just to give myself some thinking time because I felt I really needed it and I needed it and my work needed it. So I feel in a good position to have already slowed down, and now it's like there's even the funny thing is, if anything, I'm more busy now, not less busy.
Are you busy with just repositioning yourself or rethinking, or have you got work coming in as well?
Work coming in, yeah, quite a lot of work coming in. If anything, the trying to reposition, or not just reposition, but just give myself thinking time has got harder because people are wanting things, but also I've got a couple of days a week at the Royal College at the moment on interior design, which I'm really enjoying.
I wanted to talk to you about that. Yeah. It's not first on my list though.
That's more like the last.
Yeah, it is down the bottom actually. But I've known your work for such a long time, it seems. You cross the spectrum of what you might call interior products and decoration, or accessories. I wonder whether you could just give us how you got started, because you studied printed textiles at Middlesex years ago, set up your business. I suppose you first came to prominence, certainly from my perspective, when you started producing those photographic printed accessories. Yeah,
people used to call me a placemat.
Placemat, you're one of the most famous placemat designers I know.
Not a great accolade, but I have had a lot of fun over the years. Yeah.
How did that get started?
Yeah, that was kind of a happy accident. College was all about finding your creative voice, visual exploration, drawing. Photography was there because I had a camera and I would collect inspiration through it. But I wasn't using it directly because the technology wasn't there. In the early 90s, it was just beginning, but it wasn't at a price a student could afford. And then within a year of graduating or two, I did stumble across this table mat and coaster business and thought, oh, that's quite a nice vehicle for getting my designs across. And I'd been selling textile designs through an agency, and I joined the agency and wanted to learn how it all operated. So I got involved with the selling bit as well. I wasn't being paid to do that, but it gave me an insight into how that world operated. And I felt, for me, I learned quite quickly that what I was missing in selling designs was the whole process, because I'd been taught about process and taught about making and taught about seeing a design idea through to the end. So I knew I did want to run my own thing. And a lot of friends had immediately set up with Crafts Council grants and things, but I knew I also wasn't ready to jump in at that stage. But having stumbled across this coaster and placement, I mean, literally was like it wasn't a Snappy Snaps, because that then came on after us, but we'd found a company that had just bought this machinery, and he literally said to me, oh, there is a God or something, because I'd called him the day after just inquiring, and he'd just bought this machine somehow. And it funny enough, down near you in Liskeard.
Liskeard, yeah.
Yeah. So I was spending a lot of trips going up and down the country and it was a photographic company that were producing these. So every single mat was a photograph and then coated with a heated top. So in terms of durability and longevity, they weren't long-standing. And funny enough, I mean, a lot of my customers keep coming back now saying, oh, I've had these mats for 20 odd years. I could do with some new ones.
New ones a bit worn out. I was trying to find the ones that I had, but they've gone missing. I'm going to have to.
From Spitalfields. Because Spitalfields was, do you remember that? I think that's probably where I first met you, or Redchurch Street.
Yeah, Redchurch Street would have been where we had our office. The technology and the serendipity of just getting in touch with this manufacturer, the producer, provided you with a product range, I suppose, or an opportunity to develop a range.
It provided me with a product, and I was so gusto with energy of wanting to make things happen. And friends of mine were doing trade shows. I'd helped out on a few. I had to do this backward thing of, I didn't have any much money because I wasn't earning much money from selling textile designs. It was paying my keep, but it wasn't giving me extra to invest in a business. So I wrote a business plan for the Prince's Trust, and I borrowed £4,000. And the brilliance of that, not least the organisation and how it supports, but they gave me a business advisor. And with that advisor came kind of, the whip to get things done and to stick to your plan and work out cash flow. And because my aim was to sell these things, I had to show what am I going to do with the money. So I did a trade show, and that was the beginning. And that's how I launched.
And those early designs were quite striking. I seem to recall quite sort of, how would you describe it? A random selection of images, kind of quite urban.
The stuff that got picked up and kind of ran with the press were the pebbles, particularly the stones on a black and white. So I was photographing things that I'd found, or photographing the city.
Yeah.
There were New York graphics was really popular, but the pebbles and the leaves kind of took off, and I went into this sort of whole avenue of photographing objects against backgrounds that I had created with textiles. With the mats followed trays. And the only reason I kind of got into this side of that product was because my whole business plan was actually about textiles on the walls and on the windows, which is more what I'm doing now. But because this took off, it kind of took me with it, and I got busy with small product. The trays, I look back now, because we now offer design your own tray we're doing this right now because of COVID, offering families, both adults and children, to design a tray at home. And we'll make it up for you. Send it back to us, and we make it into a tray and then send it back.
I saw that because you were doing group workshops, weren't you, with people? Yeah, and that's now gone to more online, and remote. Which is a great idea. Yeah,
that's been really well received. But the interesting thing, and again, the thing I like about technology and where we're at now, is that back then I had to invest in 3,000 of one design. And if you told me that now, I'd probably run the other way, or I'd say, well, is there a customer? Because if there isn't, I wouldn't ever risk that, not least for the issue of material, clogging up the space if it's not going to be bought into. But I was ignorantly blissful then, and probably took me about 2 years to sell the first ranges.
So that investment was quite a big chunk of your money, I guess.
Big chunk in stress and understanding, because I was shipping in from Italy, storing, and I started producing ceramics, and then we'd get breakages. So it was a big learning curve, along with becoming a mother quite early and successively, one son after the other. So it was all pretty manic and fun.
Did you feel like you were making a bit of a sidestep into the products from the textiles?
At the time, yeah, I think I was so busy I didn't have time to think about that, because what I was doing was exploring. It was still a creative process. And what I was enjoying was coming up with an idea, literally a design, and then being able to enable it onto a product and sell it to customers that wanted it. And, you know, it was at that time of the business, it just went from strength to strength. And then what happened was it was too much for me. Production got too much. I mean, that's what I was telling myself, because actually what was happening with things behind my back where big producers were selling my product without my knowledge. And then it was turning up in places like Gallery Lafayette. And I got into a lot of trouble with my agents and things, but more importantly, my suppliers got into trouble, and I had to fall out of love with them and deal with lawyers. And I really didn't like that. That just made me feel like, am I doing what I'm meant to be doing here? And so licensing came knocking on my door, quite literally through Port Merion Potteries. And that is when product took on even a bigger meaning, I guess, i.e. a move away from textiles. And I started designing for their collections under my name. And that taught me a great deal, but it also took me away from, in a way, the essence of what makes me tick, which is being involved in the material process, but also involved in who I'm selling it to.
The first setup of the business is about you coming up with an idea, creating that, taking full responsibility for the whole process from manufacture to distribution, marketing, and after sales.
Yeah.
And with that comes all the stress entailed with that. And then the licensing is handing over that back end, I suppose, to the companies that are producing.
It is. Well, I feel I learned, not the hard way, but in ways that it's also so much about a language, you know, that the language has got to be fully understood. And I think I was young and not able to demand my aesthetic be really put across in every way. I was more up for the process and up from it working for everybody. And on hindsight, if I were to do it again in a big way, I'd be very different now. I think that's how I look at it. But what it gave me was freedom to be creative again, which is really where I sit and need to be.
With those licensing clients then, were you given a brief as to what to produce?
Quite a lot. No, it was more my brief, my design, but it would get slightly reinterpreted through the process, or I would miss the buyers for that feedback that might tweak it in a way that was going to work for us all. There was too many people in the process of communication, and communication is really key.
That sounds like a really fascinating combination of challenges there.
It wasn't straightforward, but what it did do, interestingly, was raise my profile in the big stores. I consequently lost a lot of my little independent stores because they felt they didn't want to compete or be linked with what I was selling in the likes of John Lewis and other places at that time. So that opened up a new door for me. And similarly, I then started working with the Tate because I had more time on my hands. I wasn't dealing with, 20 orders one afternoon trying to get them out from my warehouse. That had all been taken over from. And so working with the Tate, we were able to explore new creative things around kids because we both had young children at the time. And I don't know if you recall, but that's when I created 2 books with some friends of mine, graphic friends of mine, Zoe and David. It was an alphabet book and a book on colour. And the beauty of those books were that we were able, because of all my knowledge from production, both through what I'd experienced myself, but then also through the licensing, I had learnt a heap more about how the global world was working with shifting product and producing it and where. And so that's what made the books viable, really, because anyone who's produced a book knows it's a labour of love. And if you're trying to feed your family, that's going to be a challenge.
Did you have a design philosophy that was running through all of these different enterprises?
It's a really good point. And I think the biggest one from the beginning was always to bring joy to your table, to your interior. And as I've matured, my philosophy has grown, in terms of what do I want to get across. But fundamentally, it's still the joy and the care, and to make things that last and are loved and tell a story. Because I think when they've got a story, they are more appreciated and kept within the system. I mean, one big thing that we'll come to is the work that I've done. Well, it's through a residency, actually, where I really started looking at the circular economy. Being an advocate for that and explaining that, particularly to design students, some of which still don't even know what that means, is a big part of where I stand now.
That's the Yorkshire Sculpture Park project, isn't it?
That was a project that I made happen on the back of some other work, but my aim was to illustrate it to the public, to give people transparency and make a connection beyond stuff, just having stuff.
Yeah, I suppose the danger of what you're doing with the production of artifacts is adding more stuff to the mountain of clobber that we've all got.
Totally.
And
that's where I now sit with that, not just conundrum, but that's why I've really slowed down on not licensing at this time, and my own production through our company is now all made to order. We don't sit on stock. Having said that, I do have a bit of stock, but I'm selling that through, and my intention is to really just go forward now with making things that people want, and if they want them, they're going to want to look after them.
And does that affect the manufacturing processes or the materials that you're using?
It affects the cost, and at this point in time with the things I'm doing, it's not affecting process. But I sort of think I'm still at the sort of tip of a new iceberg, really. So I'm excited for myself to see where I'm going to take it.
Tell us a bit more about the projects with the Sculpture Park. There's a really great video, actually, which I'll put a link to.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, great.
With the sheep.
Yeah, lots of sheep.
And the wool.
Well, I'll go back to how that came about, because there's a sort of backstory that makes it make all the more sense, really. Around 2013, 2014, when I was and am still more immersed in textiles and wallpapers and things, we wanted to run some projects to kind of highlight the remaking or reupholstery of furniture. So this whole thing of keeping furniture in use and to give it haute design sort of couture, as opposed to feeling like, oh, it's a bit of a shitty armchair from my granny, I don't know if I like it, sort of thing. So that was the challenge. How can we make something that we might perceive as not cool and make it have personality and give it another life? And so we ran some workshops at the V&A during Design Festival. I think it was like 2014 or something. And the public really engaged with the live working, which was fantastic. And the storytelling. For me to make that viable financially, I had designed a collection on the back of having been to Iceland, actually. So I still love to travel. It doesn't have to be abroad. Right now it's walking around, to gain my inspiration. So on the back of that, we collaborated with the Great Recovery, which was part then of the RSA, the Royal Society of Arts. I collaborated with the woman who's headed that whole design up, Sophie Thomas. And actually the Great Recovery offered some designers a chance of a residency to go and investigate bulky waste and help Suez, that is a waste company, look at their waste streams, and for us as designers to come up with creative tools and ideas to shift it. And this was over 5 years ago. And already we're seeing that on mainline TV now with Restoration Station and all of these sort of things happening. So what's fantastic is the world is speeding along with all of these concepts. And in a way, as the phrase is coined, I think Sophie coined this phrase, waste, the word, is a design flaw. And really what the circular is all about is seeing that one man's treasure is one man's waste is another man's treasure, or woman's, we should say.
That's
not man, not just man. During this residency, we fortuitously collaborated with a company called Chimera, who you may have come across in your guys.
Chimera Fabrics.
Yeah.
Fantastic
British firm, really innovative in the way they do look at and research both plastic material, PET, recycled PET, and wool fabrics, jute fabrics, linen fabric, all sorts, nettle. And we got talking to them, and they were at that point wanting to experiment with what they would dub as a waste stream. So it was pre-consumer waste in their factories. It's before the fabric's gone out, the textile that falls on the floor effectively.
Mm.
And that was where I got tickled in excitement of thinking, oh God, this is really interesting, because it was waste wool, multicolored, that we were then advising on how to pattern. We picked a very simple herringbone pattern, but played with colour, and colour that was then mixed with this multicolour thread produced a really lovely speckled fabric. They haven't actually yet got that to market, as much as I think they're still trying. And that's an interesting thing in terms of when we're trying to reuse part waste, is the integration and then the viability of whether they can sustain the delivery of the product. On the back of that, I then worked with them and got them to still trial it for some of my projects, one of which was transforming some sofas for the VIP lounge at one of my trade shows I'd worked on, because I'd heard them literally say, oh, we've got to get rid of those sofas. And that get rid just got me jumping on it, saying, let's not get rid of them, let's give them another life.
Repulsed them.
Yeah. So having worked with Chimera, I fast forward then a year, I think probably, and I created a collection for the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. Have you ever been?
I have, yeah.
Many times, or recently, or?
Well, I went with the kids when they were much younger.
Yeah, it's a great place to visit with kids.
It's not ideally located for me at the moment, down Devon, but my mum used to live up in Sheffield. We drove up there.
That's really close.
Yeah. It's a great site, actually. I mean,
fantastic site. Yeah.
Wonderful rolling landscape and fabulous and sometimes huge sculptures.
Yeah.
Sort of sitting there in the landscape.
Yeah, so I was invited to effectively create a collection for their shop that celebrated their 40 years of art without walls. That was their strapline. What I wanted to do strategically for myself, I knew I was going to take photographs, but I also wanted to get back to my painting and my brush mark. So I literally went there and hung out very gloriously in their artist in residence place, where you have the park to yourself at night. It's a bit eerie, but quite wonderful. And I painted and photographed around for about a week, I think, and then created two collections, one that was photographically bent and one that complemented it in mark making. But on the back of that project, I was making friends with all these sheep that graze amongst the Henry Moors there. And that's where I had this thought of, oh, it would be fantastic if we could tell a story and follow the fibre from the sheep, literally all the way through to a finished exhibition, trying to use the wool as many innovative ways as we could. I went about trying to raise some money to get myself in that position to be able to deliver that, alongside the amazing woman who heads up the whole retail side, Amanda Peach. And I then collaborated with a flooring company, Alternative Flooring. And for me, I was in my element because I was in the factories. And it took me back to the early days of me exploring, but this time with a textile and weaving that I've always loved, but I never trained in. So being able to go to these factories and watch it happen at great speed, and then go and work on a tapestry loom at real slow meditative pace, and then go to the factory for the carpet, which is 150 odd years old and still making the carpet right by the river where it would have cleaned back in the day. Now they do it obviously in a different way, all environmentally correct, and really inspiring. And it was wonderful for me to be able to translate those marks into different scales, different textures, and also to create a colour palette literally from the land. If I did it again now, I would have loved to make the colours from the land as well, literally using natural dyes, because that's so where we're at right now. But there wasn't enough time. Do
you see those opportunities as a sort of form of research or promotion of a philosophy? I mean, because it must be difficult when you're at the front end of that to create something that's viable economically. Do you see yourself as a sort of pioneer of ideas that will help push things along?
I guess I'd love to. I definitely, in terms of justification for myself, it was research, and in terms of justification for it in its being, I mean, elements were sold. The blankets and the furniture we made. I didn't even explain about that, which I will in a minute. But I did want to shine a light and to, in a way, to invite people to engage with materials in a more in-depth way. And also, it's an age-old business, you know, sheep farming, wool industry, and as we know, built Britain back in the day. And it's still very valid. And in fact, it's growing as a fibre again. And it's hugely sustainable as a fibre. So I wanted to kind of look at that. And of course, there are also issues with it, as there are with anything. So I think as a human, constantly you need to balance things. I think I can't be fully virtuous. It's just not feasible. But when I say not feasible, you know, this whole element, even within the circular, it's all about balance. But what we all individually can make a difference to that whole.
I guess the beauty of getting designers involved is that they can often unlock some of the issues, can't they, with a bit of creativity?
Totally. And I think for people like Camira, they really jumped at the opportunity to be exposed in that environment and to also work with the material. So the story was a great element for all of us. Everyone involved got joy out of it. You know, I put all the passion I could into it and thoroughly enjoyed it. And actually, what I also loved was the farmer, you know, was very dubious of me in the beginning because I had to convince him that for him to sell me the wool in the beginning, he has a setup with the wool board. They automatically take the wool and pay for it. But I was, in a way, coming in and interjecting that, and it wobbled him. He wasn't convinced.
Where does the wool normally go then?
It's a good question, but normally the farmer will shear his sheep every year. It will go off to the wool board, and a month or so later, he'll get a little receipt saying what it sold for. It goes to auction. You know, someone weighs it, categorizes it, which is what the film kind of demonstrates very briefly but beautifully. All these different grades of wool and how they are used. Again, what I enjoyed was kind of challenging that, because a lot of the time, particularly Camira, were like, well, I'm not sure this wool's going to be very nice, you know, it's generally for carpets. So it's like pushing the norm, pushing the envelope in terms of how we perceive things should be and trying to push that and change that.
If you can get the product right, there's an opportunity to add more value at that stage.
Absolutely. And in a way, blankets, you know, coming out from the park, it's a rather lovely thing.
Yeah.
But when you say then, you know, the economics of that and making that viable, it's quite a thing. And in that setting, we were able to slow down the processes. Plus I had some investment, but the whole, you know, in terms of the price point, because people think things should be cheap, you know, we've got slightly spoiled. And I think where we're at right now with COVID, I really hope that there's an opportunity to rethink on so many levels.
There's a big debate about value, isn't there, in terms of how long products last?
Yeah.
And I'm just looking, I've got a pair of utility armchairs that were my grandma's, which date back from just post-war, I suppose.
Brilliant, yeah.
Still, they've been reupholstered by my mum, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a piece of family history. But that product may, well, if it costs slightly more than something that hasn't lasted, then it'd be a good investment. I think it's about understanding the value of investing in well-produced, well-designed products, and also the ability to renew them, which the approach with your upholstery fabrics to be able to reupholster. I know that lots of manufacturers these days are trying to produce chairs that aren't glued together and aren't.
Well, I think that's where we all went slightly wrong. I say we. I didn't. I wasn't party to that, but I've definitely been party to discovering that in trying to give furniture a second life or third life. What was interesting about the Great Recovery Project is we really did kind of deep dive into a sofa that we'd retrieved from landfill. We took it apart in this fab lab and found, interestingly, that the couple that had brought it to the recycling centre had virtuously probably thought it was going to get another life. It wasn't going to end up in landfill. But because there was no fire label on it, that's why it ended up in the dump. And we took it out of the dump officially, and then, you know, officially made it into a story. And that's where we pushed it along and actually ended up reupholstering it with the Camira fabric. So there was a lovely cycle to that and story. And the sofa actually lives at the RSA.
Nice.
But there was a huge learning for me there, even about tags. I think we're now in a point, so it's already happening in fashion, where a code can give you the whole history of the transparency of where your garment has come from. And I think furniture's slowly catching on to that. What we do is we fully trace everything. If you get a reupholstered chair from us, that's where you'll get the full story of where everything has come from.
Something quite nice to have that lineage, isn't there, or the information.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I think
Yeah.
anything with the story is good. And with the technology, I'm imagining it becomes easier, doesn't it? It's just taking the time to set that up.
Absolutely. Technology is speeding along. I just watched Third Industrial Revolution. Have you heard about that on Vice? I forget the guy who's worth a watch, talking about where we're heading in the next 10, 20 years with our full 5G and integrated, automated, non-driverless cars, all this interconnectivity that's already happening now with us on Zoom.
I'm going to have to look at that. I didn't realise we'd had the second one. Which was the second one?
Good question. He doesn't answer that in it, actually.
Can
you find out? Can you tell me?
Yeah, I'll look it up. I'll Google it later. Yeah. Well, I think we're at a moment of potential change. We'll have to see how it all pans out over the next few months and years. But your journey from textile designer, were you interested in interior design as a context when you were a student, or is this you're moving slowly and steadily towards more interior application of what you're doing?
I think I've always been interested in the space, but I didn't necessarily. So what I'd love, for instance, selling, I'd always loved creating the stand, the show, how it looked, how I displayed it.
Yeah.
But and as a child, I was very much into creating my space. I'd kept it very two-dimensional products three-dimensional, but in my textile days of, wall and windows. And now it's growing, yeah, definitely. But I think in terms of where my business is still at, we are still very much in the arena of, space. I'll tell you where it turned actually as well, was when I got a commission from the Royal London Hospital, which is the Whitechapel, the new posh Whitechapel. It's not so new now, but it's still I think it's still the biggest in Europe. They commissioned me to create the curtains and the tabletops and cabinets for the paediatric wards there. That was where purpose, you're asking me about my design philosophy. Well, purpose is a really big thing on my list. It has to have purpose. Things have to have purpose. And so this, to me, designing for these kids, that we spent several weeks hanging out in the hospital to get a real feel, get feedback literally from my drawings and my photography. And then in me building up the work, what was exciting about that was because of my experience in production and digital technology, a lot of the time the procurement was sort of going, oh, no, we won't be able to do that. And I was able to say, yes, we can. I'll introduce you to someone who can make that happen for us. So that was exciting. So since working in that hospital environment, I've done quite a bit of work in Oxford, and that's been more about the space, which is, I guess, where I've started to think all the more about how I progress in that way. Again, challenging to work in those environments because there's so many full stops and no's. And
I think that's the thing about healthcare, is that they're so focused on creating an environment to make people better and looking at that from a infection control point of view and a practicality point of view, that they slightly override the opportunity for creativity. And I think in a hospital, you might think, well, why do we need creativity? But actually you're dealing with patients in spaces, aren't you? Real people. And also the staff. How do you see your designs contributing to the atmosphere of the space?
Well, that's really where, so initially the first few projects in Oxford were tiny spaces. They were actually for patients where they were recovering from serious radiology or cancer treatment. And so there were these tiny little prison cells of rooms. And I went into one of these rooms and thought, how do I even, what does one do here without making them feel overwhelmed or sick? But the room was so badly thought out and there wasn't enough love in there, and so the mere getting interior designers into spaces like that is so needed. And it doesn't have to be much, but so what we ended up doing was, roller blinds they were really high windows in the particular rooms. So I got photographic clouds, took loads of photo imagery, and we kind of wanted to cover the seasons. I think I did blossom and sky. I can't even remember now. Sorry to say that. But effectively, it was little things that we could make a small difference, Then I got a project on the radiology department, which was quite a big project in terms of the hallways and the waiting room. I chose the theme to play with light and sunlight. And so I chose to look at both spectrum light, playing with prisms and light, but also the sun setting and seascapes for calmness. And so we did do some some printed context of walls, and then artworks within the waiting area, and the furniture, making sure all that worked together and spoke together. Because a lot of the time you go in, you've got 10 different styles of chairs all coming on from different directions. So yeah, little bits, but I would have loved to really affect the reception, and there was loads of obstacles there which we haven't yet achieved. There's sort of budgets, but then you think, if I could get my guy in to come and rebuild that whole reception, you'd save money, but it's tricky.
I think the challenge is in how you value economically the impact of the design. It's hard to measure, isn't it?
Very true. Although I would add that we know that a light, bright environment, of course it's got to be clean, but just keeping all of those things uplifted is so necessary for everyone's mental health and well-being. And biophilia is such a thing right now, and of course plants in hospitals is a bit of an issue, but if we can bring that outdoors in, if it's through photography or the way we deliver the textiles. I mean, I'm really sad that textiles have ended up being paper curtains that they now burn. All of those sort of things are, to me, sad progressions, and I don't know if they're going to turn back on that or not, because the curtains that we did for the Royal London were washable curtains.
It's having that infrastructure, isn't it, to
cope with it.
To cope, yeah.
Yeah, and right now it must be very, very challenging for everyone that is. Big shout out to anyone in the NHS. Thank you.
Indeed. Echo that. You've I'll edit this bit out. Just pausing a moment to reflect how lucky we are to have people prepared to do a job in difficult times. It makes the role of a designer seem quite sort of frivolous, doesn't it? But I think in a bigger picture, well-designed spaces, whether it's from a aesthetic point of view or a functional, practical, organisational point of view, are going to help, aren't they, with dealing
always,
with
always since the beginning of time we've seen that, and I think that's where we really can make a difference and really keep adding that voice and that element, because it can so easily get sidestepped, and particularly in institutions, the schools and the hospitals, they need it. The more that we can uplift these spaces and realise that the healing needs to start from the get-go. I know, and in a way, back in the 30s and 40s, furniture and spaces were very well designed and delivered. There was a simplicity there and a function and form, but I would like to get back to that a bit, but also remember we can apply uplifting, colour, light, windows. They don't even have windows that open in the Royal London. That freaked me out.
Bit daylight would do a world of good. You mentioned earlier about tutoring at the RCA on the interiors course. What's your take on that? What are you trying to teach them?
Well, I'm very new to the role as a visiting lecturer, so my take is coming in and supporting some fantastic creativity that's going on there and seeing where they're taking it, helping them question their own processes and looking at, I guess my real angle is from the material side, because of the work of late, not just the sheet to seat, piece to floor project, but in general, the way I'm thinking, not necessarily fully doing yet, because it's a big shift, but to just look at processes. And, we're in a real time where we realize our natural resources are running out, and we've got to look at reuse is top of the list every time. And so that the projects there are really exciting with all of that in sight and in view. And I guess my angle is to prod and probe and deliver some of my insights that I've learnt along the way.
the focus on materials is really crucial. It's because that's the bit that you engage with as a user, don't you? At that scale, the intimate scale of moving through space and sitting and touching things.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is where interior design, meets product design, and how they both need to work in synergy. And the more there is crossover, the more there's understanding. And I think we're seeing so many interesting materials coming out now. I just recently learned of about chips board. Have you heard about chips board?
Chips board? No.
Made from potato
Chips.
skins. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. With a bioresin. So we're talking environmentally cool, it's gonna tell a good story. I must just mention one of the products that in the show, one of my prize pieces with the wool, other than weaving all these wonderful things. I work with Solid Wool, who are down near you. Have you come across them before?
I've heard the name, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I managed to get a sheet of my YSP wool made into a top, in effect, like what would have in the 50s been a Formica top was now a wool 5mm thick.
It's a beautiful material. I'm just looking on their website now. It's fantastic sort of depth to the material.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's really, people look at it and go, oh, what is that? And then when you look closer, you realise it is. They're constantly developing, working to improve their resins, because within sustainability, resins can have major issues. And what I wanted to do, I had this sheet and I was like, I need to make a table, but how am I going to do this? And we had the wood from the park, and I worked with Julian Mayer on some furniture that he designed using this amazing black oak that had been naturally felled in the park. I then realised the missing link was this wonderful saying that I was using in my sort of PR around the whole project, which is a Yorkshire saying that you will have grown up with: where there's muck, there's brass. And so I found a fantastic brass maker, engineer guy down near Brighton. He basically made up a table that I'd sketched together with the help of a few friends. And the marriage of the solid wool with the brass is just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous.
Thanks to Ella for taking the time to talk to me. Ella's approach to the creation of products and materials to cover, clad and apply to the interior spaces of both homes and commercial premises brings a much needed splash of joy and colour, texture and pattern, which helps to characterise and give personality to spaces. There's a number of links to the projects that she mentioned: the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, a collaboration with Chimera, and her interest into the circular economy. I'd like to thank Dave Clark for his technical support in the setting up of this podcast, Kay Hanson for her co-hosting and research and organisational role for this podcast and also for the educational podcasts at the University of Plymouth, and Mark Frith for the music. If you want to learn how to be a kick-ass interior designer, we are still recruiting for the next year, and despite the COVID lockdown, we'll be starting again in September. Next week, we'll be talking to designer and academic Catherine Bishop. Thanks very much for listening. If you've got any comments, please get in touch. I look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.